we have Mr. Eric Mendonsa, and who is the Director of Sales and Marketing at Fluxergy, and his colleague, Mr. Farzad Kharazi. Sorry if I mispronounced that. So Fluxergy is a biotech company that develops multimodal testing that was recently implemented for COVID-19. So please give them a warm welcome. And Mr. Mendonsa, you can take the floor.
Yeah. Thanks Pacific STEM for having us. Really excited to talk about what we do and our experiences as engineers. I think, and also thanks Women in STEM for that great panel. It's really insightful for some of these young people in terms of how they can reach out, learn more, get involved actively in these STEM roles. So I think for introductions, my name's Eric Mendonsa. I'm the Director of Marketing and Sales at Fluxergy. My background is actually in bioengineering. I'll also introduce briefly Farzad as well. I'll let him introduce himself. And then I'll go into Fluxergy a little bit and show you about the product. And then Farzad has actually quite a little bit longer of an engineering career than I've had. And so I definitely want him to go into some of his exciting roles and also what he does at Fluxergy as well as the Director of Software. So Farzad, if you want to give a brief intro and a hello.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for having us again. Really appreciate it. I'm the Director of Software here, so I coordinate a lot of the activities involving device software, our backend software, sort of all the way up from the hardware to the cloud. Work a lot with different departments to help them sort of realize their goals. I don't know, Eric, I have more details in my presentation, but we can go over it later.
Sorry about that. That was an air compressor. So I'm actually in the automation lab here at Fluxergy, where we develop some of our test cards and the robotics that we use to manufacture our test cards. So you can see behind me, there's quite a few works in progress here. Actually, Farzad joining from the E-Lab on the other side of our manufacturing campus here in Irvine. I'll just jump into it and a little bit about myself, and then we'll jump into Fluxergy. So let me share my screen. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
All right, great. So a little bit about myself. So I grew up actually pretty locally. I went to Centennial High School in Corona, played tennis in high school, went to UCSD for my bioengineering major, played tennis over there too. I would say I was always interested in math and science and let's say, but I wasn't necessarily sure what exactly I wanted to go into, whether that was more of the medical field or more on the technology side. I kind of knew I always had a fascination with, let's say, products that interface with clinical settings. So I think one of the big things that I wanted to do every summer was, just get a different experience because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So, I had an internship at the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, doing cancer research, then another internship in Indiana with doing urology research where it was pretty cool. We got to look at, got to watch a lot of surgeries and robotic surgeries where it's like minimally invasive using something called the Da Vinci robot, and got to write a paper on that. And then also did some heart research and some audiology research. So just a variety of things just to kind of whet the palate. I think something different, while I was figuring out what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to work in something where I guess the impact was high. Again, working something in health as well, because I think that's always something that I had a fascination about. And really the work experience I had before Fluxergy, it wasn't very broad. I worked for a couple of years at UC San Diego in the cartilage tissue engineering lab, where we were actually, so we had a grant to build a bioreactor where we got to essentially make let's say, cartilage substitutes for using the bioreactor and kind of tissue engineering methods for, let's say, people that need osteochondral or like cartilage replacement surgery. So it was really interesting. I think I didn't have a broad sense of industry experience before I joined Fluxergy, but now I've been at the company for about 5 years. I started as an applications engineer, so really helping to develop our laboratory tests, for example, like COVID-19, or we work with other infectious disease tests as well. And also being the person that goes out into the field and kind of, works, with engineers like Farzad in terms of, hey, this is our new software, a new feature. How is this working for the customer? And bring all of that back for kind of this like continuous feedback loop. And it's definitely been a sweet spot for me where, I can do what I like to do, which is, sell innovative products and work with the people that are using them, but also be part of the feedback loop that directly drives the development of the product as well. So again, working with experts like Farzad and the rest of our team, and even the clinical experts to say, hey, what does this product need to do? How is it going to be used in the field? And also, what are the design restrictions that we have with the technology itself? So having all of those, let's say, meet together is really important. And these are some, sorry for the graphic pictures, but it's, those were fun times. So just a little introduction to Fluxergy. So what do we do and who are we? So we've been around for about a little over 8 years, 8 years now. And really the vision was to provide a testing platform that could make laboratory testing accessible. And, really, I think to be in parallel with, let's say, the central laboratory testing. If you look at COVID in general, actually, millions of samples have been tested, and you need that large laboratory infrastructure. But let's say I'm going into more of the, emergency department or in the hospital, and you have someone that comes in and you need to quickly know, hey, do they have COVID-19? Or you need to quickly screen someone, say in a paramedic, or, hey, you're doing events or something like that. As we reopen our communities, having a system that can diagnose quickly is really important alongside that large laboratory infrastructure. So I don't know if anyone can see, this is the device here, analyzer. But I think really the first test that we worked on was actually HIV viral load test. And, really the need there was essentially, I think there was a WHO statistic where it took 60 days to get a viral load measurement back, just because, you have to take your sample from a village, then you have to go give it to a courier, then it has to go back to the central lab. And by that time, it's way too late to, let's say, give a therapy, let alone, let's hope that patient's okay still. And so, I think when we built the system, the idea was having a system that can not only do that viral load type of testing, but also measure other types of parameters at the same time. So let's say doing something like your general metabolic panel, or with HIV, you need to be able to do a white blood cell count so you can see how healthy is the person. Also being able to rapidly, look at, let's say, an antibody response and look at the host response while looking for the pathogen as well. So it's really, again, it's the ability to take a lot of tests that are typically reserved for multiple types of systems and putting it on a single system that's, let's say, portable, easy to use, has connectivity with the software, and something that we can place in a lot of different places and look at population health. And another big thing is that it needs to be cost effective so that we can routinely get testing. So again, just to jump in here, I think if we look into healthcare, I'm sure we've heard on the news just the high healthcare costs that we have in the U.S. And this is just a small part of it, but if we're able to implement more testing, more routine testing, either the central lab side or even with us on the point of care side. Point of care means near the patient. You're able to essentially be more efficient with the therapies that you use, and more efficient with the cost. And so I think that's really what we're looking to do here at Fluxergy is provide a system that can give a broad range of tests to people and also in other industries as well. And I'll jump into that. So these are our three core products. And so we have our software, we have our analyzer, and we have the Fluxergy card. So really the analyzer is like a general sensor system. So what I mentioned before was kind of the ability to replicate, let's say, a majority of lab tests. So in a lab test, you're going to take your sample, mix it with some kind of, let's say, chemical reagent or buffer, and then you're going to maybe potentially some enzymatic reaction will happen. Something will light up essentially. Okay, this is there, COVID's there, it's gonna light up. Or I'm measuring my cholesterol. Okay, this much cholesterol is there, it's gonna light up to this intensity. With the analyzer, it's really there to just monitor, power and monitor what's going on our cartridge. And so, you know, in the analyzer, there's a set of cameras, there's, you know, there's a pump in there, there's a fan, there's quite a few different things, but it's really designed to emulate a lot of the basic processes that go on in laboratory testing. Again, this is not going to replace all laboratory testing in a way, but it's there where we can run quite a variety of tests, closer to, let's say, the lab professional, or closer to where the sample is. So the Fluxergy card, I think that's a big component of our technology and our core technology. So it's actually, we use a manufacturing process similar to how printed circuit boards are made. So like the microchips in your phone. There's actually a local company called Kingston Technologies, which is our investor, and they're one of the biggest memory producers in the world. And so we use actually similar processes that they use in terms of printed circuit board manufacturing to make these kind of, let's say, healthcare chips or laboratory chips, where we can put different types of samples on them and test for different things. So the card that you see in front of you can actually do 6 different targets in terms of PCR testing. So if anyone's gotten one of those uncomfortable nasal swab tests throughout the pandemic, this is essentially the system that you can run that type of test with. So, and then the software, I think, is really what brings it all together. This is the control interface where you can control the analyzer and really run the variety of tests and be connected to what you need to connect to. So that's whether in your hospital system or, you know, for the future being at home use, or really, I think that's what ties it all together and actually controls everything. So, and I'll let Farzad jump into that a little bit more. And Farzad, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything. So I'll quickly, again, like just to touch on what's inside the box. You can kind of see, take a close look. Sorry, let's look. So you can see what's inside the box. And actually, this is something that Farzad built. You know, we have a fan, we have a pump, we have kind of various cameras that can do fluorescent measurements, colorimetric measurements. You know, so what it's designed to do is really power and monitor what's going on the card. Farzad, I don't know if you can maybe jump in and talk a little bit about, I guess, what went into making the device. So this is actually the 12th version of the device. So there's been 12 different prototypes that have been released, and now we have this product that's actually in use in actually healthcare settings now. Go for it, Farzad.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so one of the major differences in terms of the development of this device was that we started with a modular approach, right? So a lot of times in the industry, what happens actually almost exclusively is that you sit down to develop a new product and people talk about, okay, what is it we're making? Are we making a PCR device, right? A DNA amplification device? Are we making a blood cell counting device? Are we making an immunochemistry device? What are we making, right? And then they limit their scope and then they make that thing that does only that one functionality. And so one of the major differences in how we designed this was that when we sat down, we said, okay, is there a way to design something where we can possibly get lots of these different modalities at the same time. And so that's the sort of the byproduct you see here, is the expression of that design at the very beginning. So if you look, there's a couple numbers there, right? So like number one, that's the system on module we have. So it's like a tiny computer that sits on that board. It's a full-fledged computer. It's got RAM, a hard drive, a video card, everything crammed into something. It's like the size of your credit card. Actually, your high schoolers might not have credit cards yet, but so you know, when we have technology like that available now, right, it allows us to not limit ourselves, right? So we do some pretty heavy lifting in terms of optical analysis algorithms, things like that on board that might not be available if we had, you know, if we were just doing, let's say, an immunochemistry device, we would have never picked a processor this powerful, right? So that's kind of one of the things that, you know, when we started this, we were like, well, let's give ourselves headroom, right? So yeah, and there's a couple different components here. You know, we use additive manufacturing, so you can see number 2 there is like a small fan. That's not, you can't produce that using really injection molding or any other process. It's too sophisticated of a shape. Yeah, lots of stuff. I mean, number 3, we have the pneumatic manifold, and it goes back to the modularity, right? So it's hard to see in this image, but it's actually fairly simple for us to swap out different pumps. So if, for instance, the pump we have in there now for moving fluid in around, we don't need to redesign the whole device, because when we designed it, we said, okay, how do we build an interface that is able to accommodate different technologies, but meet the same sort of end purpose. So yeah, the manifold there is a great example of that. If we want to swap the valves that control the whole manifold system that moves fluids and air around, we can do that. The camera system inside of that number 4, there's 2 cameras connected via USB. Fairly straightforward for us, right? We use an interface that is an industry standard. So if we move to a different set of cameras, it's very little rework for us, right? It allows us to experiment and try different things. So I don't know if that helps, Eric.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Farzad.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so it's, you know, it's kind of been a lot of years in the making, but I think, like Farzad mentioned, it's the modularity that's built in, because requirements are gonna change as we move forward, and continue to add on to the device. So in terms of like the test card, actually, and I'll run through this quickly in terms of time. I think the big thing about our test is typically cartridges, even with systems like ours, these rapid tests, they can only do one type of tests. And we're developing something where you can potentially measure different types of parameters at the same time. So let's say PCR, where you're actually measuring coronavirus directly, right? Then I can do the protein response and look at, let's say, hey, what's your antibody measurement? Is someone vaccinated? Or maybe, you know, there's certain inflammatory markers that, you know, it's a indication of how bad the disease will be if someone gets it. Okay, I can measure those at the same time as well. Same thing, let's say, okay, we have all college students. We want to see how much sleep are they getting, you know, how stressed are they? Let's do STD panel. Let's also do, you know, general wellness panel, right? I think those are also the kind of things that we can do in the future. Just to, you know, in terms of like the test card manufacturing, you know, I think that's a big part of, you know, what we do here at Fluxergy is, you know, we use kind of various screen printers and robotics and things like that to automate all the steps. But this is kind of, again, talking about, you know, by measuring not just, let's say, the antigen, or let's say, like, if we use COVID-19, for example, by measuring other types of things, I can get larger insights. It's not just healthcare, and it's not just about us. It's also, you know, we're here with the environment. I think with, you know, COVID-19 too, like zoonotic diseases, things like that. With animals, we live, there's more to the world, right? And I think laboratory information is important for all of those things. And so really, you know, we see a lot of applications for our system, even from, you know, let's say swabbing at your McDonald's, or, you know, how is your favorite food produced? to, let's say, making sure you have better care for your pets. I think that's all really important in terms of what we're trying to do here at Fluxergy. And just in general, in terms of, I think, all of the areas that laboratory diagnostics tackles. And we heard that earlier from the group with the public health laboratory. So I'll quickly, I'll quickly touch on this, but I just want to go through a few applications. So this is actually, before we did healthcare, we actually jumped into equine medicine. And I think one of the cool things here is we had this box and we didn't really know where to take it. And so we went and knocked on maybe like 20 veterinarians' doors in all around Southern California. Again, reaching out, sending cold emails, just seeing what sticks. And, we went to cat and dog vets, and I think there was a little bit of education for them to be had. But then we went to horse vets and they're like, hey, we would use this all the time. Because when horses were at a big show, one horse gets sick, they're sharing the same trough, then it spreads to all the horses and it's a big problem. So, it's actually, we just dealt with an outbreak in Canada recently where, a facility was shut down for 2 or 3 months. There was also in Spain, 800 horses got sick and then went to all the rest of Europe and started having little mini outbreaks. So just like it's kind of similar to COVID-19, it's kind of with infectious disease, and happens with animals too. And it's really important for them to get results quickly so they can, let's say, quarantine the animals. Also, the animals can't really speak to the humans and say, hey, I'm not feeling well or I'm not feeling sick. So kind of skip through these because I want to give Farzad some time to go through his experience. It's just a general workflow of a test. It's like mix kind of your sample and this biologics and put it on a card into the device. But really, like, our product and laboratory testing in general is really multidisciplinary, again, from the software to the hardware to, again, the design of the test to, let's say, target the specific genes, and then also all the biologics and biochemistry around working on our cartridge or just in the laboratory reactions in general. So, in terms of, if anyone ever has any questions after this, you can always reach out to us, and we're happy to answer those questions regarding laboratory testing or just jobs in laboratory testing or opportunities. Again, during the pandemic, so we've been working at various hospitals and health systems. We're just actually releasing our product in Europe. But like, for example, there's providers at UC Irvine that they're in the urology department. They'd go get tested every morning. They'd all pool their sample into one test, and then they would go out and see, let's say, 50 patients. But if someone comes back positive, just to limit exposure, and also because they're getting exposed a lot, they can essentially be pulled off immediately. And then you're having, like, you're mitigating as much risk as possible. Now it's great that we have the vaccine, and that's a great thing. But it's kind of how the system's been used during the last year, and it's definitely accelerated the opportunities we've had. And hopefully we made a little bit of an impact. These are all different things, different ways we want to use the platform. Mobile and remote testing. This is a case designed by Pelican, a local company as well. If you guys are looking into a cool company, mobile testing is a big application that we want to do as well. Again, reopening schools, making sure we can get back in the classroom. And then, on the software side, connecting everything. That's a big deal. So I'll kind of, maybe Farzad, I want to give you some time as well. Actually, let me run through a few slides here. This is just some, in terms of how Fluxergy started. I think Farzad and I were part of the original crew. But this is kind of like the R&D. It was all R&D back then, and so you can see kind of that's a screen printer that was used for making T-shirts to make our initial cards, and that was the first device testing our investor, actually, in terms of just the first one of the first prototypes. So it's definitely come a long way, because now we're a 70,000 square foot facility, about close to 100 people, all of these authorizations, which means we have to make a quality product, which is a good thing. Things have changed, so it's and about the scale. How do we make 1 million of these units? I think that's what's really important here. How do we make 1 million of these units at a cost-effective price point? That's we really want to make a difference. So again, there's a lot of different positions. It's not just, let's say, designing the device or on the software side. I think there's a lot of interface of technology and kind of STEM roles. So I'm sure, or should we say STEAM? Because even in marketing, we're using engineering tools to drive our sales and marketing and monitor things and facilitate that back into the design of the product. All right, I'll stop there and hand it over to Farzad, because I definitely want to give him time to go through his experiences before and at Fluxergy. Thanks.
And Eric, we definitely still do R&D. I don't say I resent that comment, but we still have our fun. It's not all manufacturing now.
They won't allow me to that part of the office anymore. No, definitely, you're absolutely right. No, yeah, I think I think there's a lot of back to what Farzad said. We do a lot of R&D, as you can see behind me. It's a big part of what we do. But it's I think just in terms of kind of to the group, it's really what, in terms of what's kind of made us move forward, is just asking questions. I think Dr. Matei mentioned that as well. Just continuing to ask questions. What's the need? Find what you're interested in, and just kind of don't be afraid to email and contact people with thoughtful questions. I think that's why I quickly responded to this and was excited to speak at Pacific STEM, and excited to really give any insight that we can in the future. So, I think that's something where you guys are the next generation and solving. There's bigger problems to solve after us. So, I think that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Cool. Looks like I'm back. All right, everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
Yes. Great. All right. Yeah. So just a little bit about myself. I'm the director of software here at Fluxergy. So that encompasses both the device software and our UI software, and all of our backend systems and some of the internal systems as well that we utilize for R&D development, sales and marketing, a lot of different purposes. But just want to go through my background really quick and save some time for questions, hopefully. But yeah, starting out as your high school students, my high school is Mount Carmel out in Southern California, East County. In high school, I was always into sci-fi, and that naturally took me towards robots. So I was in the robotics club, also did Science Olympiad, and at home, just messed around. I had like a old 386 computer that I would mess around with, like QBasic, basic, very, very old programming language. Even when I was playing with it, already old. After high school, I went to Maricosta College. There I concentrated on my transfer requirements. They had a computer club that I was a part of, but mostly it was just getting everything ready for transfer to university. The UC system has a really, really robust transfer system when I was going to school anyway. I don't know how it is now. And so it was a good way to save some money and get those requirements out of the way in a sort of smaller setting. So after Maricosta, I transferred to University of California, San Diego. When I got there, so as a transfer student, I wanted to make sure I stayed engaged and involved in the student community. So I joined the Triton Engineering Student Council. At first, I was just a member, but then I got elected to the board after my first year. And I was the project spaces chair. So I helped all the other sort of project teams at UCSD or in the engineering sort of department manage their spaces, make sure they're being safe, get them equipment, et cetera, so stuff like that. Over the course of my studies there, I joined Tau Beta Pi, which is just really useful for having on your resume. It's a high GPA honor society. And then through TESC, I also met the guys at Triton Racing, or UCSD's sort of Formula SAE team. It's a open wheel race car engineering project team, and you compete against other engineering teams from the other schools in the region, or even internationally, nationally, all different levels. So that I stayed there, and then through Triton Racing, I got an internship at Magcanica, which is a company that does magnetoelastic torque sensors for Formula One drive shafts. So the Formula One drivers want to have real-time feedback on torque, and they can do that with these special sensors that this company produces. So sort of simultaneously juggled these various responsibilities while at the same time, trying to maintain a decent GPA. Some of the key takeaways I would say from my experience in college were one, to surround yourself. Who you surround yourself with is going to affect your outcomes to a large degree, is what I noticed. The people who partied a lot or had friends who were partying, playing a ton of video games, they just tended not to have time to do these other things, and their outcomes were very different than the group that I sort of try to associate myself with, right? You want to be part of that sort of engineering leadership team, or that group of people that are pushing forward, and the ones that are working with the faculty, working with industry, getting that experience early on. Another key takeaway was that the real world experience was invaluable. When I was transitioning from school to finding a full-time job, a question that all the recruiters and all of the interviews would ask is, hey, outside of your classwork, what have you done? What's your experience? What kind of projects have you completed? And for software, you can definitely build up a profile in GitHub or et cetera. But if you're doing something like mechanical engineering or chemical engineering or any of these other engineering disciplines, it's extremely useful to have an internship or some sort of project with a deliverable that you can point to when these companies ask about it. And that's something that we ask about too. When I do interviews now, it's something I ask about. So, and then building personal sort of connections with the recruiters and faculty. When you run in these circles, what you'll realize is there are companies that are interested in recruiting at whatever school you end up in. And the more you go to these events, you'll see the same people because it's their job to go there. They start to get to know you. And a key sort of thing for this is that it removes you from the general pool of applicants when you're looking for a job. If they know you, they know what you're about, they know you're dedicated, right? All of a sudden, you're not in the same category as a random applicant on a website with 1,000 other applicants that's falling into a bucket. Maybe you get seen, maybe you don't. As a quick anecdote, one recruiter told me that when they open a position, they basically print the first 200 applicants and just throw the rest away. It doesn't even matter how good your stats are. Some of them just sort by GPA and take the top 50 and look at those resumes. It's really tough trying to go the route of just the sort of cold call. And your faculty also are really, really good, because in engineering schools, generally, they're going to have connections with industry. So they're going to if you're curious about a specific application or what it's like to work somewhere, they can connect you with those people. And oftentimes they can be extremely helpful. A good way, by the way, of getting to know your professors is always go to office hours. People, for whatever reason, don't go. And so sometimes it's just you and a professor hanging out for an hour, which is, these are world-class people at the peak of their field, and it's just you and them hanging out. It's an amazing opportunity. So highly, highly, highly recommend office hours every chance you get. So that was UCSD. Had a lot of fun, met a lot of really cool people. And I'll talk about it later, but I actually met the founders for this company at Triton Racing. So after school, I got recruited by UCSD, by Solar Turbines. I met them at a job fair. Again, this is like a regular job fair, except it's only for people that are in the engineering leadership teams, right? So again, you're reducing the pool of people that are also applying, right? And they know that in these sorts of organizations, you're already one of the motivated thought leaders, and these are the people they want to recruit, right? So yeah, so I got recruited by Solar Turbines. I joined as a manufacturing engineer in the controls department. I got my Six Sigma green belt by helping out with various process improvement projects. And then I got transitioned to doing first article projects, which are the new projects, the ones that don't have precedent. So that's always really fun because you're doing work that no one's done yet. So you kind of get to kind of step into the unknown a little bit if that's something you're interested in. Second position, after doing that for a couple of years, I moved into project design engineering for the inlet and exhaust of the turbine. You can see a picture of the turbine there. It's basically a jet engine, but what they do is they bolt it to the ground, and then on the output shaft, they attach a generator or a compressor or whatever you're trying to drive and you use the sort of efficiency gains of using something like a turbine system to drive other machinery. So I was doing the inlet and exhaust design for specific turbines. During this time, I think one of the other presenters also mentioned mentoring. Solar turbines, UCSD sort of had like a relationship with solar turbines, and one of the programs with that was called Jump Mentoring. And so these are programs that are available to anyone in the engineering department or engineering students. And what they would do is they would pair a group of 4 students with an industry mentor and a academic mentor. And it was a really great way to get insights into, hey, what should I have on my resume? What should I be doing during my time at UCSD? You know, what do you guys look for when you're hiring people? How did you get your job? All that kind of stuff, right? And it's free. It's totally available. You just got to go look for it. You know, your engineering academics office is a great place to start. But if you just roll with the circles of people that are doing these things, you'll hear about this stuff, right? You'll be inundated in those groups, and that'll give you that leg up. So after 4 years, I decided I wanted to go to grad school. I enjoyed the work, but again, my passion was always robots, rockets, race cars. Those are the things I always liked, and solar turbines. The product was pretty well developed. There wasn't a ton of R&D or high-tech stuff happening, so I wanted to move on to something a little cooler. So I went to University of California, Davis for my master's degree. I also did mechanical engineering for this as well, but my focus was in mechatronics. So I started out as just when you're an undergrad, your degree is a little generic. You don't have a lot of opportunity for specialization, but in grad school, this is really where you can focus in on what you want to do. So I think it's really important to make sure when you're applying to pick a school that's doing what you want. Regardless, so I did mechatronics, which is sort of the combination of control systems, mechanical systems, electronic systems, and software systems, kind of putting them all together to make something like a robot. Isn't, if you see those robots that are on like car assembly lines, that's like the classic mechatronic system. It encompasses all of those things together. My focus that I decided to specialize on was cyber physical systems. So if you see the little diagram of the car there, the key takeaway is that there's a computer system and there's a physical system, and you need to connect the two. You need to have an idea of what's happening in the real world so that you can also react to it and control it in software. That's the idea. Any autonomous vehicle, classic application of this, right? They need to be able to read street signs, see pedestrians, stay within the lines, keep a certain speed. There are all these simultaneous actions that the control system's taking based on inputs from external places. And I want to say the key takeaway here, honestly, is that don't be afraid to follow your own path. When you join these schools, they're going to give you a curriculum that they recommend. But if you don't like it, or if you don't think it applies to what you're trying to do, don't be afraid to do your own thing. I only took about half my courses in the mechanical engineering department. The other half were in electrical and software. They had nothing to do with mechanical engineering at all, right? And by doing that, you can get sort of synthesis that isn't otherwise capable if you stay within a certain silo. So yeah, it was a really fun time. We built little educational robots in my lab, 3D printed educational robots. It was really fun. So then after UC Davis, I joined Fluxergy in 2016. I knew the guys that the founders from Formula SAE team at UCSD. They wanted a software robotics guy, and they were like, "Hey, you're doing that, so come help us." And that was the extent of my interview. So I joined up, and we decided to give it a shot for 3 months, see if it was a good fit. Ended up being a great fit. So my first position was as a principal embedded systems engineer. In that role, I did technology selection, system interface design, electrical design, and then all the software engineering. The product, when I joined, you saw that little silver box in Eric's presentation. It was basically a prototype. It didn't really have any design specifications. It was kind of loose. And so my first task was, okay, we need to make this an actual thing. So you have to start buttoning all the pieces together to make that work. And so, yeah, it was a lot of coding, a lot of failing. I'll talk about that in a bit, but a lot of trying things out and not having them work. And in reference to that, I think, what made our design different, what made us succeed in the way that we did, And I think we've already talked about the modularity, both software wise, that's a standard practice in the software industry is software modularity, but hardware wise as well, which is a much less common philosophy to have. But a big one was that we just weren't afraid to fail. We tried a lot of things. I remember I spent 2 months trying to work out a USB subsystem for controlling the device. I just couldn't get it to work, and I had to give up and try something else. Just not being hard on yourself about that is really the hardest thing to learn. Is that, look, I tried this thing, I gave it my best. It didn't work. I'll just search for a different solution, and we did. We ended up controlling it versus via Ethernet versus LAN through LAN, which ended up being much better anyway. So, I think the important thing is just keep trying, keep failing, keep learning from what you're doing, right? As long as you're learning, you're going to be moving forward, and that's the key. We set some really ambitious design goals. So again, we didn't limit ourselves to one modality. We didn't tell ourselves we're just making a PCR device, right? We said, what if we try to make everything, right? Even if you fail, you're probably going to end up with way more than if you had limited yourself to begin with. And I think that's just a philosophy that's important to follow. And also, refusing to accept that's how they do things, right? You'll hear this so many times going forward in your career and in your life and everything. No, this is how it's done. Well, who says why? Why do we have to do it this way? Is this right? Just because something is done some way doesn't mean that's the way it should be done or that's the correct way to do it. That's just how people do it. So questioning that can lead you to interesting design spaces that otherwise you wouldn't end up in. And having an amazing team, right? So the people we hire collaborate easily. I'm sure you've all been on a group project, right? And you tried to give a suggestion, and the person you gave a suggestion to got really annoyed or really angry with you and didn't want to do it, and they get offended and stuff. We don't hire people like that, right? We don't want people like that. We want everyone to be able to say their voice and put their input, right? A diversity of perspectives is valuable, and we try to foster that environment. And I think that gets lost a lot of the time. In your own job search, I would say try to find a place like that, because it's going to be a lot more fun working with people who are down to just spitball ideas and work off of each other ideas and throw away their own ideas to help you with your idea, versus having people that are, defensive and egotistical. So yeah, definitely. So anyway, so that was the first couple of years at Fluxergy. Then I transitioned to associate director of software. So in that role, I started doing more of a translational job where I took strategic goals that I would be given and then translate those to technology implementations, right? So we want to do immunochemistry is an idea. It's not a solution, right? So how do you take this idea and then build a technical solution around it? That was the next step. And then we realized we were too small. Back here when we were building the first systems, we were 2 people in the electrical and software department. One guy did all the algorithms, and then I did everything else. So, all the optics recognition, all the sort of positive negative determination, that was all him. And then the rest of it was me. Hold on, looks like I got a message. 1 sec. Oh, okay, running low on time. All right, I'll finish up. All right, so yeah, and then director of software, just more strategic direction, hiring, finding team members, organizational structure. I don't get to do a lot of coding, although I still enjoy it. Mostly talking to other departments like Eric's and making sure they have what they need. So that's all I have.
Thank you. So on the interest of time, if anyone has last minute questions that they would like to ask, or if our speakers have anything they want to wrap up with, you can go ahead. So we have a question from Nathan. He asks, because you guys were working at Fluxergy since pretty much one of the earliest days of the company, how was your experience in that, or any adversities that you faced through that?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge is how much work there is to do. So when you join a small startup, one of the things you really need to be prepared for is the workload. It is not a 40-hour-a-week job. It's not even a 60-hour-a-week job. It is almost your entire life, depending on how early you join. The later you join, generally, like the people we hire now, it's kind of just a job to them probably, right? They're not interested in the risk, right? When Eric and I joined, we didn't even have any sort of business plan. We didn't know what this thing was going to do. We just thought it was really cool, and we knew there was an application, like something this powerful must be useful, but there was no guarantee that we had customers. We didn't know. There's so much we didn't know and so much we had to do. So that's something you need to be prepared for. But one of the awesome things about that is you learn more in 1 year at a startup than you will probably in 5 or 6 at a bigger company. Because the pace you have to run at and fail at and learn at is much greater. You don't get things piecemeal fed to you, right? They come at you like a fire hose and you just take it and go. I don't know, Eric, if you have any.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with that. I think it's the ability to pivot, fail fast, and yeah, take as much information in as possible. I think even with COVID-19 and getting our product out there, we kind of had to quickly see, we had systems here in the US, and then due to, let's say, not getting regulatory approval, we had to jump over to Europe. And so we're spending all night calling Europe and kind of figuring out, let's say, where else needs our systems, right? And same thing with the equine clinics. We went and knocked on a bunch of doors just starting out. Who needs this box? Well, what does it do, right? And then it's kind of, again, failing fast, and just I think that's the fastest way that you learn, and you get a lot more. It sounds cliched, but you do get a lot more from that. So yeah, I think the time though, it's been really rewarding though. I think again the team, like I think me and Farzad still like each other after working together for so long. But we like coming in on the weekends. We like sharing our story, and we like learning what other people have to say.